And now I'm very excited about our keynote speaker. I've had the opportunity to meet her on several occasions. She is a dynamic person. She is a ball of creativity and energy, and she's brought so much to Oklahoma in her short tenure here. So I'm going to read her biography to introduce her, but we're so excited to have her here. Consul Edurne Pineda has a 25-year career in diplomacy, specializing in consular affairs. She was appointed to the Consulates General of Mexico in Chicago, Atlanta, and Dallas, where she served as a deputy consul general for a decade. Appointed head consul of the new Mexican Consulate in Oklahoma City in October of 2022, Pineda began her tenure on December the 1st of 2022. Under her leadership, the consulate opened its doors on May the 20th, 2023, providing vital services to Oklahoma's Mexican community. As the 51st Mexican Consulate in the USA, its mission extends to supporting the community and fostering bilateral relations in government, economics, culture, and tourism between Mexico and Oklahoma. The consulate embodies a long-standing historical connection between Mexico and Oklahoma dating back to the early 20th century when Mexican migrants made substantial contributions to the state's development, particularly in the railroad and agricultural sectors. Through cultural events, educational programs, and diplomatic initiatives, the consulate celebrates our shared heritage and addresses the needs of nearly 500,000 Mexican nationals residing in Oklahoma. These efforts preserve our historical connection by promoting mutual understanding, cooperation, and respect between the people of Oklahoma and Mexico. And so I'm very thankful to have her here today, and I know that you will enjoy what she has to say as well. So I'd like to welcome to the stage Consul Edurne Pineda.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Good morning. It is my pleasure to speak today at the Oklahoma History Symposium. This opportunity is incredibly valuable to me. During my presentation, I will share information about the work we do at the Consulate of Mexico in Oklahoma, the profile of the Mexican population in the state, and relevant details about the U.S.-Mexico relationship. I would like to extend a special thanks to Trey Thompson, Executive Director of the Oklahoma Historical Society, for his very kind invitation, and also to Sadie Orellana for her friendship and constant support to the consulate's work. As I explained to Mr. Thompson when he invited me to be a part of this wonderful event, I am not an expert in history, although I certainly love it. I remember how during my teenage years, I once declared in my home back in Mexico City, to the shock of my parents, that I wanted to either be a historian or a ballet dancer. Unfortunately, neither of those aspirations came true, but both continue to dance around in my memory and soul. Therefore, being here with you, addressing this very esteemed group of historians or history lovers, holds a special meaning to me. So I would like to begin by sharing that Mexico has the largest consular network in the world in one single country, which is the U.S., with 53 consulates, plus our embassy in Washington, D.C., while the U.S. has 18 consular representations in Mexico. Let me just check. Okay. This responds to a strong relation between both countries, beginning with a very strong binational community. In 2022, in the U.S., Hispanics were the nation's largest racial or ethnic minority with 19.1% of the total population. Mexicans were the largest population of Hispanic origin, accounting for 60% of this group, approximately 40 million people. From 2000 to 2021, the Mexican origin population grew by almost 80%. Within this group, the people born in Mexico decreased proportionately from 42 to 29%. Approximately half of this group, the people who were actually born in Mexico, which are actually like 12 million people born in Mexico, are undocumented, half of them, close to 6 million people. On the other side, the U.S. State Department has said that in 2022, around 1.6 million U.S. citizens lived in Mexico, and that the country was the top destination for American travelers, around 34 million travelers, U.S. travelers to Mexico. Additionally, Mexico's census counted a different group of U.S. citizens living in Mexico of around 800,000 people, out of which almost 500,000 were U.S.-born children between the ages of 5 and 19 years old. So children born to Mexican parents, mostly, who were born here in the U.S. and live in Mexico because their parents went back to Mexico. So the current estimates are that at least 2 million U.S. citizens live in Mexico today, by far the largest U.S. diaspora in the world. In 2022, Mexico and the U.S. celebrated 200 years of bilateral relations. This relation is framed by international treaties as the Bilateral Consular Convention between Mexico and the U.S. signed on 1942, and the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations of 1963. The new Consulate of Mexico in Oklahoma City serves a growing community. As Trade explained, we opened our doors on May the 20th of 2023 with the presence of top-level Mexican and U.S. officials. We service the Mexican community in the entire state of Oklahoma. Several cities in the U.S. have lobbied to have a Consulate of Mexico, but the decision to open it here in Oklahoma was based on different factors: the growth of the population of Mexican origin, a strong domestic migration to North Texas from other states in the U.S., mainly California, New York, and Illinois. Latinos and Hispanics are Oklahoma's fastest growing demographic and now make up to nearly 13% of the population, growing by 42% since 2010. And also, very relevantly so, thanks to a strong support and even the lobbying with my government from local authorities to have the consulate. In particular, Governor Kevin Stitt and also Mayors Holt and Bynum. I believe that this effort responds to the value these authorities give to my community. Oklahoma City Public Schools student body is 58% Hispanic. Tulsa's is 37%. It is estimated that 490,000 Hispanics live in Oklahoma. Today, close to 400,000 of these are Mexican. Oklahoma City is 21% Hispanic. Tulsa, 19% Hispanic. Guymon is 58% Hispanic. Actually, our mobile unit is in Guymon this weekend. Lawton is 15% Hispanic. Oklahoma City was the 6th fastest growing large city in the U.S. between 2010 and 2020. Hispanics had a lot to do with this. The search for a building began a year ago. The Greater Oklahoma City Chamber of Commerce graciously accompanied me in this process. We found a building that fulfills our needs, provides us with stable location for a decade to go, with the possibility of growing our operation, which we believe is going to happen. Plus, we have become a very positive actor within our neighborhood. The consulate provides wide services and is an ally. The government of Mexico has developed a wide consular practice that encompasses over 30 different services within 4 departments in each consulate. Documentation is the one that is most demanded. We issue Mexican passports, consular ID cards, voting cards to vote in Mexican elections, notary public, civil registry, certificates, visas for foreigners. If you want to buy a house in Cancun, you need to come to us and get a temporary resident visa or something like that. Our documents are state-of-the-art and they are trustworthy. Since our inauguration, we have issued almost 50,000 documents. For each document we issue, we follow a thorough process to verify the identity of the people we issue the IDs to. We also have a protection department that gives legal advice and legal education and information to our nationals. We build up alliances with law firms. We then allocate some resources to defend legal cases on behalf of our nationals when we deem it necessary and sensible. We have a community affairs department as well, which focuses on three main programs: financial education, preventive health, and education in general. We want to teach our community on how to navigate the educational system in the U.S. in the best way possible. For this, we have signed MOUs with different organizations here in Oklahoma, OKC Health, the Latino Community Alliance, Community Agency, the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, etc. OCCC, we have several MOUs that we have already signed. And with these areas, we are serving on average 200 people every day, 550 people one Saturday monthly. And again, we have a very active mobile unit that visits different cities around Oklahoma: Tulsa, Guymon, Lawton, Enid. And the fourth department that we have is promotion. We work to promote Mexico's interests, including the interests of our community, their image, and the recognition of the contributions they make to the local economy and society. And also to promote a stronger, healthier dialogue regarding the relevance of the relation between Mexico and the U.S., and of Mexico as an ally and indispensable partner to the U.S. Within this framework, I would like to share with you that the consulate has taken on an active role in various areas within Oklahoma. And this has recently expanded to the political social arena. Recently, there has been significant discussion about undocumented immigration to Oklahoma, which, by the way, estimates allocate at around 75,000 people, which is only 1.8% of the general population in the state. This discussion has been happening around HB 4156. HB 4156 is an initiative that Governor Stitt signed into law last Tuesday. The law introduces a new felony in Oklahoma called impermissible occupation. This applies to individuals who entered the U.S. or remain in Oklahoma without proper immigration authorization. The penalties for this offense range from fines to imprisonment. Legal experts believe that the law will face challenges in district courts and may be stopped. They argue that it encroaches upon federal immigration matters, which fall outside state authorities. The law appears to be nearly impossible to apply in practice. It does not allocate additional resources to law enforcement for implementation. Plus, law enforcement agencies and county authorities lack the necessary tools to determine whether an individual has proper immigration permission to be in the country. Despite ongoing legal debates, the approval of this law and its discussion process have already negatively impacted our community and arguably the state of Oklahoma. As I presented to Governor Stitt and Speaker of the House Charles McCall in a meeting that we had a couple of weeks ago, my government and the Consulate of Mexico fully respect the sovereignty of Oklahoma and the United States and do not intend to intervene in any political processes. However, the nature of our work, grounded in international treaties that apply to both our countries, Mexico and the U.S., allows us to uphold the interests and well-being of our nationals. The possible reach of this broad initiative, separation of families, unjustified detention of individuals with permission to be here, racial profiling, its discussion process in Congress, which portrayed undocumented immigrants in a negative light, along with media coverage, has caused fear and distress within our community. There is concern that these portrayals may contribute to extremist rhetoric, potentially affecting the broader population in Oklahoma. Unsubstantiated claims that undocumented migrants are criminals, terrorists, or don't pay taxes only perpetuate harmful misconceptions. Unfortunately, there have even been voices seeking to dehumanize immigrants. We should not forget that the recent demographic and economic studies reveal that Oklahoma's future is closely intertwined with its immigrant community. We should not ignore the negative consequences of the difficult circumstances they are currently experiencing, exacerbated by the proliferation of negative narratives that frequently fail to recognize their substantial contributions and sacrifices. These arguments can be effectively countered with data from comprehensive research studies. For example, the mythical tie between immigration and crime. A recent study from Stanford University showed the likelihood of an immigrant being incarcerated is 60% lower than of people born in the U.S. The study is detailed in a working paper released by the National Bureau of Economic Research using U.S. Census Bureau data. It focuses on immigrants present in the census, regardless of their legal status, and on men between the ages of 18 and 40 years old. These immigrants come to work. I can tell you, when we see their hands at the consulate, when they come to render their documents, you can tell how hard they work. They try not to get into trouble. They are not criminals. Another myth is the tie between undocumented immigration and terrorism. A recent Cato Institute study shows that the chance of a person perishing in a terrorist attack committed by a foreigner on U.S. soil over the 48-year period studied was 1 in 4.3 million per year. Nevertheless, the hazard posed by foreigners who entered on different visa categories varies considerably. For instance, the annual chance of an American being murdered in a terrorist attack by a refugee is about 1 in 3.3 billion, while the annual chance of being murdered in an attack committed by an illegal immigrant is 0. That's the statistics. During this 49-year period analyzed, 9 illegal immigrant terrorists attempted, not succeeded, to commit these attacks in the U.S. soil. Of those 9 illegal immigrant terrorists, 5 illegally crossed from using the U.S.-Canada border. 1 stowed away on a ship, and 3 illegally crossed the U.S.-Mexico border. These 3 immigrants were of Albanian descent. The truth is, terrorists are much more sophisticated than undocumented migrants. They usually come in with a visa. If you go back to the horrible events of September 11, these terrorists did have a visa, and they were actually trained in the U.S. to learn how to fly a plane. So they are usually not undocumented. The data supports this. Another myth is that undocumented immigrants do not pay taxes. The Nonpartisan Migration Policy Institute recently reported unauthorized immigrants pay sales taxes as does everybody else, and very significant numbers of them also pay federal and state taxes because they are withheld in their paychecks. Approximately 12 million undocumented immigrants live in the U.S. with no legal authorization to work. Yet, an estimated 9 million do work, both on and off the books. Since undocumented immigrants don't have Social Security numbers and are not authorized to work legally in the U.S., they are not eligible for any Social Security benefits, whether they have paid into the system or not. How undocumented immigrants pay into Social Security, you may ask yourselves. Well, payroll tax. The 12% tax taken out of salaried workers' paychecks, split between employer and employee, primarily funds Social Security, accounting for 88% of the payouts in 2017. Undocumented workers typically use a fake Social Security number or someone else's Social Security number when applying for salaried jobs. While only a handful of U.S. states effectively require employers to check an employee's eligibility and their Social Security number through. They may also file their taxes using an ITIN number, which the IRS provides to people who don't have a Social Security number. And many of them do. Many of them are actually business owners who file for their taxes with this ITIN number. If all undocumented immigrants were deported today, next year's Social Security trust funds would have approximately $13 billion less for benefit payouts. It's a considerable loss of dollars, especially when it's projected that the Social Security funds will be depleted by 2034. And I am not saying, please don't misunderstand me, that it is fine for there to be undocumented immigration. It is widely acknowledged that every nation has the right and urgency to defend its borders. My country, Mexico, firmly supports the effective management of the border we share, a border through which 500 million legal crossings occur annually, reflecting Mexico's status as the U.S.'s primary trading partner. However, it is reasonable to conclude that the current state legislative efforts here in Oklahoma will not contribute to the cost of securing the border. It is clear that the current immigration flows respond to an economic work labor need from the U.S. economy, which is not covered by the local labor market, neither by an outdated immigration framework. These immigrants are employed the moment they get in the U.S. Actually, they come here first of all, because they get to cross. And second, because once they get here, they are employed. So it doesn't seem to be fair to criminalize them. Criminalizing them neither is going to solve anything, neither is it fair. Mexico has invested significant resources in managing the flow of immigrants traversing our country with the intent to reach the U.S., drawn by the opportunity to join its robust economy. Efficiently managing a border as complex as ours necessitates adequate resources. Until this is achieved, the incentives for migrants to come to the U.S. will persist, with the likelihood of crossing and the prospect of employment in an economy experiencing labor shortages across all sectors. Mexico is a very relevant partner to the U.S. in different fronts. Allow me to share some data with you. Mexico's economy has proven to be resilient. It has opened and grown steadily during the last 30 years. It grew 3.2% last year and an average of 2.5% during the last decade. Poverty rates have gone down in Mexico. The population living in poverty decreased in relative terms from 43% of the total population in 2016 to 36% of the total population in 2022. Mexico has shown a very strong fiscal discipline during the last years, even during the pandemic. Clear symptom of that is is having a very strong peso. Our peso was 24.6 pesos per dollar on 2020 versus around 17 pesos today. So this means it has had a 30% revaluation in 4 years, plus a 10% interest rate payment to investments in Mexico. So if you're thinking about investing, think about Mexico because it is a good deal. So foreign direct investment to Mexico set a record last year, $36+ billion, in part due to an economic dynamic named nearshoring. Nearshoring to Mexico is growing as the world economy moves forward deep into the 21st century. As the world's economy experiences rapid changes on multiple fronts, from technological advances and geopolitical realignments to social demographics and climate, each transition comes with potential strains and disruptions impacting long-established global trade flows. An example is the pattern of trade-led global growth that has prevailed in recent decades is challenged due to a rise in the risk assessment of maintaining long supply chains, In addition, in tandem with extreme weather events, geopolitical instability has incentivized companies to diversify their supply chain risks, creating an opportunity to consolidate a more robust regional-based supply chain in North America that is resilient and competitive. Mexico is also, as I just mentioned, US's main trading partner. Not Canada, neither China, but Mexico. Here's the data from the US Census. Here you can see Mexico is the main trading partner. In 2023, US-Mexico trade totaled $800 billion, almost 16% of US commerce, versus 11.3% with China. Since August 6 of 2023, the Washington Post reported US companies are buying less from China as relations remain tense. Chinese imports down 24% through May, and Mexico is now the US's top trading partner. This large volume of trade directly and indirectly supports millions of US jobs. Mexico is the first, second, and third largest destination for merchandise exports from over 30 US states. US and Mexican supply chains have become increasingly integrated and production sharing. And here, to this point, I would like to share with you this graphic that shows how 40% of all US's imports from Mexico have American value. So you sell products to us, we manufacture them, and then we send them back to you. So 40% of the products you import from us are actually American. And also talking about the states specifically, I would like to show you these two graphics. Texas, which is always talking about closing the border, which is not going to happen because our economy would collapse, with all due respect. Texas traded $285 million with Mexico last year. Oklahoma traded $2 billion with Mexico last year. So here is the potential we have to grow our economic relationship. There's plenty of misconceptions around immigration. One of them, let me show you this data that shows how immigration soared. Of course, we all know that after COVID. Total CBP enforcement actions have grown sixfold in the last 6 years, passing from 525,000 in 2017 to 3.2 million in 2023. These are encounters, not illegal crossings, because some media outlets are using this number to say this is the number of illegals who have come into the US, but these are encounters. An encounter could happen several times with the same individual, and it doesn't necessarily mean that the person actually came into the US. But it grew sixfold during the last 6 years. Most of these immigrants are not Mexican, but they cross through Mexico, putting enormous pressure in our southern border, immigration system, and local authorities. Human traffickers move migrants and bring crime and abuse with them. Mexico has around 35,000 agents from different agencies guarding both borders and crossing points, including 18 rescue points, because we need to rescue these migrants from human traffickers, but they also hate us because we're trying to stop them. It's a very difficult task we have, as opposed to the US, which has less than 19,000 agents at the border with Mexico. Nevertheless, your economy is 20 times bigger than our economy. 20 times bigger, but you have half the agents guarding immigration affairs. As a matter of fact, last year, only 20% of undocumented migrants to the US were Mexican. The other 80% were immigrants from all over the world. The following two slides show how Mexican immigration to the US has flattened, with just 1%, a 1% growth last year. You can see the 1% there. And actually, before COVID, the relation of immigration between Mexico and the US was negative for us, meaning that more people were going back to Mexico than those who were coming here. After COVID, because your economy came back so strong, the demand for these workers has been so strong, in addition to the border being weak, to be honest with you. These two factors came together, plus the human traffickers networks, and they are just bringing all these migrants. I can tell you about multiple stories we have heard at the consulate of people who were knocked at their doors in their localities in Mexico, human traffickers offering them to bring them to the US with the whole package. We're going to cross you, we're going to get you an immigration attorney, we're going to get you an asylum permit and then a working permit. And because it is going to take you 2 or 3 years to see an immigration judge, you're going to be able to work for 2 or 3 years, and that is going to cost you $10,000. Well, I don't have $10,000. You can sell your house to me. And that's what they're doing. They are just taking their homes, and that's how they end up here. Nuclear families. It used to be men before, then women. Now it is the couple with young children and without any documents. They just have the paper that Homeland Security gives them with their picture taken inside of the paper, and they come to the consulate to try to get a passport from us. Of course, we don't issue a passport to them unless we verify their identities. Imagine how challenging that is for us. But that's what we do. And we interview them, and we go back to databases in Mexico. We put pieces of documents together, but we do it. We don't issue documents easily. We're very strict. So this is a graphic by nationality, but again, it was only 20% last year of Mexicans crossing illegally into the US. The US-Mexico border is the world's deadliest land migration route, according to the United Nations Migration Agency. Nevertheless, the border is also a very rich region. As I mentioned before, it registers 500 million legal crossings per year. By far, it is the most active border in the world, plus a binational community of around 30 million people that have everyday activities in both sides of the border. This is a very rich border and very complex as well, and therefore it needs to be administered well, and for that there is a need to invest sufficient resources. For example, many people ask us, why don't you just simply stop the migrants at your southern border? Because now some media outlets understand Mexico as an extension to Homeland Security, and they actually, ask us why you are not doing your job. You should be stopping all these migrants for us. Well, it's not easy. You need a lot of resources to do that. These migrants start piling up 100, 200, 300, and they start pushing. And the only way to stop them is to become very aggressive with them. And nobody wants to do that. Then the alternative is to detain them. For that, you need shelters, you need administrative staff, you need judicial staff, you need resources to feed them, to give them medical care. Mexico doesn't have those resources for all this gigantic flow. We can't. Apparently, the US, you're the richest nation in the world. You haven't decided to allocate these resources either. It's a very complicated situation. There are intense and active conversations between both our governments to implement measures to reduce the crisis. Mexico is willing to cooperate and has proven this once and again. But it is also, and rightly so, asking the US to recognize the contributions of migrant workers, those who have been here for 10, 15, 20 years, working really hard, who have raised American families, who don't have any criminal background, and invest in the development of the regions that are expelling them as well. This is something that my president presented at the negotiations table on December when very high-level officers from the US government came down to Mexico. And I heard in the media here a couple of congressmen were insulted by his request. And they were accusing him of believing himself to be a congressman. He doesn't believe he's a congressman, but what I thought to myself, neither is he the employee of Congress. The US labor market needs these migrants. The US economy keeps on adding jobs. you have built the strongest economy in human history. The US economy grew 2% in 2022 and 3.3% in 2023, compared with China, which had a GDP growth of only 2.9% in 2022 and 5% in 2023, which is insufficient for their population base, plus a demographic growth that is insufficient to sustain an aging population in China. To continue being competitive, the US needs to have a strong economy, one that has a strong labor market. Estimates say that even if all people available to work, including undocumented migrants, were employed, there will still be 4 million working spaces on field. There are approximately 13 million spaces on field today. Mexico also has a shortage of labor. People come here not because they are poorer than before or because Mexico is more unsafe than before, because the data doesn't support that. There are some regions that are not safe, unfortunately, but it's not worse than 6-7 years ago. What is happening is what I explained to you, the human traffickers knocking on their doors, and also el compadre in Tulsa calling his compadre in Michoacan and telling him, come here, compadre, I need your help. I have plenty of work, come help me, work with me, and bring la comadre and your kids because I know a guy who's going to cross you. And that's what's happening. And again, we need these workers. We're actually beginning to hire Central American migrants. There is a new flow of Haitian migrants working in Mexican markets because Mexican businesses, small businesses, are not being able to fill their needs, their workers' needs. Another myth is that there is an invasion. The data doesn't support that. In 2023, 14.7% of the nation's residents were foreign-born, approximately 50 million people, more than half of whom were naturalized citizens. Out of this, as I have said before, 12 million immigrants were undocumented, which represented 3.6% of the US's total population. This is very close to the trends that the US has registered during the last 30-40 years. And again, Oklahoma has 1.8% of undocumented, its population is 1.8% undocumented, which is half the national rate. In my opinion, this is actually making Oklahoma's economy less competitive because these migrants work very hard and they are usually underpaid. This migrant community, the 50 million people, they had a spending power of $1.4 trillion in 2021, and they paid $525 billion in taxes. This was 2021. Of course, this has grown. And this is the number that I was telling you about. 15% of the population in the US is foreign-born, which is very similar to what you have seen before. So it's not really an invasion. This is business as usual. It's just that you have a stronger economy. And what happens when you give these migrants papers? They build the 5th largest economy in the world. There's a recent study from the Arizona State University showing that the Hispanic economy within the US is the 5th largest economy in the world, larger than the UK's and India's economy. And just before closing, there's another topic that I would like to touch, which is the fentanyl crisis. There's also a characterization about Mexicans being drug dealers and Mexico being the one to blame for this crisis, which is a terrible crisis. But I would like to share with you these reflections. Mexico did not create the demand. I don't know if you have seen a movie from Julia Roberts called Ben is Back. This is a story of a mother of a teenage boy who broke his elbow while he was playing basketball in middle school. She takes him to the pediatrician, and the pediatrician prescribed oxycodone. So he became an addict. I don't know if you're aware that several state attorneys, mainly from Republican states, have sued Big Pharma and also the largest distribution retail chains like Walmart, Walgreens, for selling prescriptions during almost a decade with knowledge of how highly addictive they were. We did not create the demand. We do not consume these products yet. Mexico has put together a nationwide campaign to prevent addiction. I pray that we won't fall into this. We do not produce the components. They come from China and India mainly. Mexican drug cartels import these components through Mexican ports because there's a lot of corruption, and this trade has a huge corruptive power because there's a lot of money involved in this trade. Mexican drug cartels fabricate the pills in domestic labs. These are small, like kitchen labs, and there's thousands of them scattered around certain regions. So the voices that say, let's bombard the cartels in Mexico to get rid of this problem, I don't know what they're thinking to do. They are not going to get rid of the problem. What they would do definitely is bring Mexican public opinion completely against the US. And that would be a problem. These pills get crossed on its majority, and this is documented by Homeland Security. They get crossed by US citizens through formal ports of entry. In 2023, Mexico had a record year for drug seizure. We seized almost 2,000 tons of chemical precursors, 405 tons of methamphetamine, and 157 tons of combined drugs like fentanyl, cocaine, meth components, etc. We are trying really hard. We destroyed 189 clandestine labs, but there's thousands of them. We're trying really hard, but this is a big, big challenge. Also, I think it is worth thinking about the size of the US's territory, because once these drugs get crossed, your continental territory is 4 times bigger than Mexico's without Alaska and Hawaii. So I wonder who distributes all these small pills throughout the streets in the US, who sells the pills, and who money launders the gains of this trade. So it doesn't seem to be only a Mexican problem. This seems to be a binational problem, a binational huge challenge that we need to confront jointly instead of just blaming everything on Mexico, because that is not going to solve anything really. Over 100,000 people died of an overdose in the US in 2021. Over 35,000 people died of homicide in Mexico during the same year, mainly related to cartels in fight and the fight from Mexican authorities against them. These cartels are very heavily armed, mainly with US-bought weapons that are brought illegally into Mexico, where citizens are not allowed to purchase any gun or carry one. We cannot buy guns in Mexico. The law doesn't permit us to buy a gun. But these cartels have very powerful machinery, gun machinery. Well, just to close on a happy note, I would like to say that America is very popular in Mexico. We like you a lot, and that's what the data shows. I really hope it will continue being that way. I really wished some outlets and some actors in Mexico looked at Mexico differently, and also at immigration and undocumented migrants. Facts should matter to all of us. Such persistent misconceptions about immigrants and Mexico muddy an already tense policy debate and could tense the bilateral relation between the US and Mexico to the point of significantly affecting it. I recently heard an academic said, "We will not have good policies and a healthy bilateral relation without the facts." I couldn't agree more. I hope that you find this message appealing and can help us share this information with the different groups you work with, so they can have access to a more realistic and honest analysis of the US-Mexico relation, so we can help strengthen it to the benefit of both our countries and societies. Thank you so much for this space, for your invitation and listening to me today. Muchas gracias.
Thank you.